Hello and welcome back to Mission Makers. Today, the worlds of music and motorsports collide in this very exciting episode recorded live from Blue Marlin Ibiza in London, where I'm really honoured to be one of the resident DJs. This episode is brought to you by Regent University, which is a phenomenal business school nestled in the heart of Regent's Park. It's a really special place to me because I studied global business management there in my 20s, and it's also where I set up my racing club, which organises some incredible events both on and off campus. And today I'm super proud to be serving the university as the vice president of the Alumni Club. So earlier in the summer, we invited Pole Position for an exclusive panel recording on high performance mindset and entrepreneurship, followed by a DJ set from all of us. And as you'll discover in this episode, Pole Position is a dynamic duo formed of Loïc Le Joliff, the founder of Sonar and Brunch Electronik, with Jaime Alguersuari, who is a former Formula One driver turned DJ, and he's also been on the podcast earlier this year. So a big thank you to Blue Marlin and to Regent's University for making this event happen. It was definitely an event all of our community will cherish for a really long time, and I'm so happy that I can share this video recording with you. So Jaime is a former Red Bull Formula One driver turned DJ. And he's even raced alongside one of our alumni, Eduardo Piscopo, in the Red Bull Junior racing team, which is super interesting. And Loïc Le Joliff is the founder of Brunch Electronik and a fellow artist. So welcome, guys. How are you both doing? Thank you for flying in from Barcelona.
Well, thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Farah. You've been amazing to us. Thank you so much for inviting us.
It's a pleasure. So together you both play under the alias Pole Position, and you guys are going to be DJing on later on tonight. And so we're very excited to dive deeper into your journeys and talk a lot more around the high performance mindset that comes from Formula One, entrepreneurship and community, which I know, Loïc, you're very focused on community with the brands that you're building. And also for our audience to ask a few guest questions. So let's kick it off. Jaime, I actually had the honor of interviewing you on my podcast, Mission Makers.
Yeah, I remember.
And as you know, I always like to begin my interviews kind of going a bit deeper into the meaning of our guest's name. And on our podcast, we talked about how the name Jaime means supplanter, taking over from someone. And this was quite fitting because Jaime's father was a former motorcyclist and racing driver. So the racing gene was clearly in his DNA. But Jaime, you've done something that only 800 people who have ever lived on this earth can say that they did, and that is to race in Formula One. So can you tell our audience, how did you first become interested in racing, and what on earth was that journey like towards becoming an F1 racing driver?
Well, I mean, it's a long answer maybe.
Absolutely.
But I'm going to be as short as I can. My family was into racing since I was, before I was even born. And my dad was obviously trying to push me into racing. So even when I was 6-7 years old, I started, testing with a go-kart in Spain, in Barcelona nearby. And it started all like very organically. My family was very used to races and racing, and that was all I was living in my house, And then at some point, I actually liked it when I was like around 9 or 10. And things started to become a little bit more professional. I started to travel, of course. This is a sport that you need, it's quite specific because it's not like football or tennis. You need help from sponsors and companies. And even if you are a good driver and you're doing well, you need, assistance of people who believe and trust you. And I was very lucky because when I was in 2005, I got selected by Red Bull in the junior team program. So basically they were sponsoring you. They had 2 Formula One teams, and the deal was very simple. They sponsor you, but you have to give them back results, like a simple company. So basically I had to win, otherwise they would kick me out. And things went well. And I started living in the UK. I raced British Formula 3 in 2008. I won in my first year, and then they upgraded me into one of their Formula One teams, which back in the day was called Toro Rosso. And it was a beautiful adventure. It was a beautiful tour. I really enjoyed racing there, of course. I would have loved to keep on going with a better car maybe, because Formula One, it's really a lot about technology and aerodynamics nowadays. Of course, you have to be good. You have to be a great driver to be there. And that's all I can say. I mean, it's been now, I think, around 13, 14 years since my last race. I did a little bit of racing back then after Formula One, and I did some tire testing for Pirelli. I just can't say, I mean, you know, you train to that, and you get all this testing and all this work for becoming Formula One driver, which is for sure special, but I just don't see it maybe that special anymore. But yeah, it was good fun. I have great memories out of it, and I traveled the world. I met a lot of interesting people, and of course it's always going to be on my heart, and racing, it's always going to be inside me, you know.
Yeah, and the sport's obviously changed a lot now, so we'll definitely talk about that, because it is the fastest growing sport in the world right now, and for good reason. But Loïc, we found out that your name means famous warrior, and that's super interesting, because naturally as an artist, you have a front-facing role. It's very public, right? But you're also simultaneously spearheading the growth of your own project, Brunch Electronik. And since its humble beginnings over a decade ago, the brand has grown to be the largest event series in Barcelona, with a weekly attendance of 9,000 people. And you've booked some of the most important artists in the industry, from Carl Cox, Nina Kravitz, Amelie Lenz. Carl Cox is a fellow racing driver, but there are too many artists to name who you've booked, you know, at Brunch. I think what's really interesting about this brand is that it's actually revolutionized clubbing, because Brunch Electronik have a daytime and a Sunday format. And that's actually been exported to many, many different cities around the world now. On top of this, you also have a key partnership with Sonar, running events with almost 500,000 people in attendance. And you also hold a BAA in marketing from HEC in Montreal, one of the best business schools in the world. So talk to us about your journey into electronic music, and what did it take for you to get to this point?
So first of all, thanks for the meaning of my name, because I didn't know it. So, but it's cool. Like she told me before. I was like, oh, cool. I didn't know.
It's not a bad meaning.
No, it's a good one. It's a good one. Thanks a lot. So actually, you resume kind of pretty well everything. Just like maybe I'm a bit closer to you guys around. I mean, you love Formula One and racing, but I've been in a business school, and I've been trained to be a finance guy or marketing guy, insurance guy. And at some point, I was working in advertising after my business school, working at a big agency in Montreal, moved to Barcelona. And I had the chance I was really into electronic music, being a DJ, and I had the chance to start my company, to start events, and to be with very good partner, with at the right time and the right moment, to establish a company. Now that we are about 75 people working, we do about 35 million incomes every year. So we became like really big in nothing in 10 years. And it's been a journey where actually everyone at the beginning was like, oh, you cannot do that. I mean, it's not a real job and stuff. But now I still have people asking me, so what do you do on the side? You know, before I decide doing Brunch Electronik, I was like, we have like 70 people working for us. I'm not doing anything as well, beside pole position, of course. So yeah, just like I live my passions. I believe that you can do any kind of business if you are really passionate, and if you do it well, and if you do it working always in a long vision approach. I never work for money. Money came after. I think it's something that I've really had to learn with the time, and yeah, now I'm really happy because I live of my passions, and I can do what I want.
I think it's a real privilege to first of all know what your passions are, but then to actually make it your work. Sometimes it's hard, but it doesn't feel like you're really,
I never
in
work.
that corporate jail.
Yeah, if you work with your passion, you will never work one single day in your life. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm sure many people in our audience are quite curious about how did you and Jaime get together as an artistic duo. So, Loïc, could you tell us a bit more about the formation of Pole Position?
So I met Jaime like I think 3 or 4 years ago. Actually, I'm really passionate about Formula One. So when you get to know someone that is into Formula One, we became really good friends, and I was really annoying, like asking him a lot of questions all the time, a lot of details. I wanted to know everything, because of course we also drive to survive. We watch the Grand Prix on the TV, but then you have to know the real thing. And the thing is, when you're really passionate of a sport, I can speak with him about Formula One, but I'm gonna be always wrong, because I never went into a Formula One, But I got really passionate. We've been talking about that. Jaime has his project as choir, as a DJ, as a producer. I was doing also DJing, but I was more focused in electronic music events, organizing them, and eventually. We got to the idea. We were DJing a few times. I invited him to DJ with me back to back. I said, we should do a duo. I say, okay, what will be our name? We are two. We like Formula One. Let's call ourselves Pole Position. We believed it was a joke at the beginning, but then we're like, okay, we have to find a name, and we always came back to Pole Position. So I was like, let's do Pole Position. That's it.
Nice. So we were talking earlier about how you guys actually have some new brand growth, different marketing strategies happening. So Jaime, how do you like to incorporate motorsport in this project? And could you share a little bit more about the new directions the brand is going to take?
Well, the real story that actually Loïc haven't mentioned yet, it was that we actually met, like not directly, but he came to he was living in Montreal. And
I didn't know you. Come on.
Yeah. Well, we didn't know each other, but I really remember that race because I was in that race. And I finished 8th, and I was starting from the pit lane. It was it was the longest ever Formula One race in history because it rained for 4 hours. Like, it was insane. And Loïc apparently was there,
I was. It's not apparently.
Yeah. and I found it.
But I was in the with like the rain on myself.
The first time we went for dinner, and we started talking to each other. He told me he was there, and I really remember that race because it was really tough. And like, I remember that race like probably one of the most difficult race I've ever done. And it was funny that he was there and he lived that experience, and that was the first time kind of, that he was in the same racetrack that I was racing, and I found it quite funny,
I don't know if you would have talked to me at this time.
Of course.
So it goes without saying that being an elite athlete requires exceptional physical training, but something I think, and I think people sometimes don't realize in F1 particularly, you see people driving cars, but the actual amount of strength you need on your neck, on your body, because of the huge amounts of G-force. And also, like you mentioned, when you're racing in extreme weather conditions, in the rain, but also in Singapore, for example, you're racing in 30 degrees heat. It's very humid. You sweat like 5 kilos when you finish the race. The average heart rate of an F1 driver is typically between 150 to 170 BPM for 2 hours straight. And if you take your eye off the ball for a second, you're crashing a multi-million-pound car that might have to get fixed within the next 24 hours. So I think there's a lot to be said, on the mental aspect of that and the psychology, that is required to maintain that level of focus for such a long period of time with so much on the line. And obviously, let alone for Red Bull, which for any Formula One fans in the room, I think we know it's a very ruthless team. So Jaime, when you were racing, what would typically go through your mind when you're racing, and how would you, when you put that helmet on, how would you just shut out any of those distracting thoughts, any of that pressure? And also, when you're thinking about overtaking someone, how would you measure that risk?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of it you'd never think about like the cost of running a Formula One team. Formula One teams back in the day spent like 350 million a year, and my team was spending 85. So you don't really think about the cost of things, which is somehow is good, somehow is really bad, but you always have to give the very best. You're a racing driver, you're designed to push to the limit. And this is why we are trained since we were kids, since we were 8. I remember the first day I started talking with Helmut Marko when I was 15. There was no nice greetings, it was just pressure, and this is the way it works. Whether you take it or whether you die, like this is life, and it's a lot of mental work. Some of it you train it as well, like with psychologists and so like how you deal with pressure when you put your helmet on and you have to deliver. You put this option tire and you do this perfect, amazing lap for qualifying, and then you manage your tires for the race, and how do you speak to the engineers, how you manage the press. For me, that's the worst side, you know, how you manage all the pressure from the press, which is actually, you know, asking a lot of uncomfortable questions and so on, and how you get your space for yourself, how you recover from the race, and then you go back. Sometimes it just doesn't go well because you don't really understand the car. Even if the car is not competitive, you know, you have your teammate, which is, you know, pushing and kicking your ass off, you know, he's trying to beat you and you have to beat him. So, because people are comparing all the time yourself with your teammate. So there are many things that happens and that you obviously prepare before you get into Formula One. But for sure, Formula One is another story because, you know, there are like 1,000 employees. There's so many information coming and throwing into you, many engineers with so many numbers and data that is happening. And there's a lot of work behind the scenes, like not driving the car, that has to be done and that has to be performed in the right way. And you just have to deliver, you know. And even though sometimes it's not enough, because in Red Bull, as you know, very well mentioned, good is not enough, you know, and even winning is not enough. Like for Max Verstappen, winning is not enough. Like he goes back home and plays the simulator, trains with the simulator and keeps on pushing because winning is not just enough, you know. So that's like the mentality. It's just what it makes the difference. And I think not just in Formula One, in every sport, the mental side is what just makes you from good to top class, you know.
Fascinating. Can you talk to us about how you actually then switched gears into the music industry? And do you think that you cultivate, you know, all those skills that you acquired as an athlete? Do you bring that into your career in music?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and also I can talk for Loïc as well, because I can see many things from my life also on Loïc's, like very strict on the work, being professional, having a routine of work, like not just making music and playing well. It's not just about this, you know, it's like being perfectionist on every aspect, on the marketing side, on how we speak, on what we do every single day, meetings. Like you have to respect a certain routine. You have to keep it up because we sometimes play like maybe 3-4 times a week, and you have to be, you know, healthy, and you have to be, you know, like in good conditions in order to have energy, because this job is difficult, you know, like you sometimes, like I wake up tomorrow at 4:30 a.m. because I have to take a flight at 7:30, you know. So it's tough, but it's sometimes the negatives from this job, and you have to, you know, be very, very concerned about it. And I think what I learned in Formula One, which fortunately was my only university and my only studies, it's that routine and that strictness of trying to give my very best every day to become better than yesterday. And just I'm not this kind of guy who sits around and don't have like a pattern to follow and maybe make music at night and then, you know, go to sleep very late, smoke a joint, and then who knows, you know, I don't do this kind of things. I follow a routine that helps me out to keep healthy. I go to the gym, I train hard, I feel healthy, and I feel energized in order to give my very best.
A few shots sometimes.
Yeah, of course. I drink wine and, you know, I have fun, of course.
No, but it's true. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of people see a DJ's role and think it's so much fun, and it absolutely is. But you're waking up at 4:30 a.m. tomorrow, and you're taking a flight, and you've got to do this all over again tomorrow. And in order to operate at that level, you have to learn how to perform at your peak and respect the rules, you know, in a way. So sometimes when you want to break them, you know, when it's safe, but you can't be breaking them, you know, like the people in the audience can when they're at, you know, at a party. So Loïc, in F1, as we know, as Jaime mentioned, there's almost 1,000 people working at the very best of their games. These are people that are the best at engineering, the best at marketing, and they're working across the globe to make two drivers. As you mentioned, they're often rivals, to make the drivers' dreams and the team's dreams come alive. So Loïc, tell us what you've learned from working with Jaime, and also tell us about the team behind Brunch Electronik.
Working with Jaime, of course, is really consistent. He is really he's going every day into the studio. He doesn't give so much space, I guess, for other things that working, going to the gym is, and then on the weekend, it can be more more partying, more free. But I mean, I've been learning this with Jaime for the Formula One, and also because I really like Formula One, and I've always been impressed because if you think about it, it's just 1,000 people working for 2 cars only, or 1,500, which is absolutely crazy if you think about and just everybody going the same direction, going with the same goal. It's kind of like ants, or bees, all working just for the queen, at the end it's a bit like this. I was say, and yeah, for us it was just a really smaller organization. We're like 75 people, which is quite big for the music entertainment as all level. We're not Live Nation or something like this, but yeah, we became really. We were 3 partners, then 2, and then slowly, organically, we became a bigger team. But there is something more like on the business school side that I didn't learn at the business school, and I was really missing actually, is that they're training you to be a good manager, but sometimes they're not training you to be a good entrepreneur. In a way of one of my biggest problem as an entrepreneur is to manage people. And how do you really manage people? It's not your management class that you will learn at school. It's more about how do you feel empathy? How do you read your team, your employees? How you can read their needs and going to the same directions. It's something at school I never learned, and that's I was a bit disappointed a bit of business school for that. But yeah, this is the most challenging part I think for me in the company and in my entrepreneurial life is managing talents and teams.
Well, the education industry is one of the last to be revolutionized. So I think there's a lot to be said about how we actually learn information and apply it to real world experiences. And talking about that, obviously, when it comes to music and motorsport, there's a lot of adrenaline involved, whether you're racing a car, whether you're finishing an amazing gig at 5 a.m., 4 a.m. How do you actually wind your mind down? And I think entrepreneurs face that same problem because they're staying awake, they're thinking about everything that's on their shoulders. How do you switch off at night? Do you have a routine? Do you have any tips?
We play golf.
Yeah, I start to play golf. He plays good golf, but
it's the best thing to disconnect. Trust me, if someone here plays golf, they know what we're talking about.
Well, I don't
meditation.
I mean, really never disconnect, but I don't see it as a problem myself. I try sometimes to disconnect, but it's when you have a company, it's like your baby. If you have to choose, if you run a company, it's always going to be part of your mind. It's really hard to cut. You decide if you want to be an employee, you can go on Friday night and forget about your job until Monday. But if you run a company and if it's getting bigger and bigger, it's hard for me for the moment because it's growing the company. I guess at some point I will have to slow down a little bit, but I don't see it as a problem.
Yeah, well, you have to be prepared to wake up at 6 a.m. if necessary. So it's clear that the community is a very important element for Brunch Electronik. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about this because your brand goes to some incredible lengths to leave a positive impact on the surrounding areas. Whether in Barcelona you're distributing 20,000 flyers to the neighbors to let them know that a party is going to happen, whether you're creating stages from recycled cigarette butts, whether you're getting volunteers to clean up thousands of tons of waste from the spaces that you operate in. And you said in a previous interview that festivals are a great platform to spread new philosophies and to change behaviours, which I think is fascinating because it's not just about throwing a festival, it's about thinking culturally, how can this shift the needle? Because as you say, you can't just invite people to come to the party and not offer them a safe space. It's also about changing the minds of people who do those sorts of things. So when it comes to building communities and making change, what's your advice to entrepreneurs?
If you want to hear the rest of our conversation, then head over to Spotify, Apple, or wherever else you get your podcasts.